we saw, the TJ08-E has a very unique layout, which makes a really incredible use of space. In addition, obviously, the installation is going to be a little bit different than what we're used to. We're going to start the install by putting in the power supply. First step, though, is going to be taking off the top of the case. It's held in by 2 screws on each side, 2 in the rear. With them removed, lifts up, slides out of the way. As you can see, the top is open. Got space for the power supply as well as space for your optical discs. Power supply will go into the case and drop in from the top and slide up into place, obviously held in with 4 screws to secure. As you can see also, you've got an opening in the back panel right here for all of your power supply cables to go through. With the power supply in place and the top still open, I'm going to put in the optical drive. The knockouts come out, 1 screw on each side. Screw out. It will just pop right out through the front. And we can slide our optical drive into place. Line it up. And hold it in with 4 drive screws. Next step of mounting the motherboard is actually made a bit easier by a removable motherboard tray. Taking a look, it's held in 2 screws in the back, or I should say on the side, and 1 screw in the rear of the case. After the screws are removed, slides forward, flips down. This will allow you to do all of your mounting, all of your system components. You can even lay it next to the case, do all of your wiring, and then simply slide it back into place, lock it, and put the 3 screws back in. Obviously, if you're using a larger motherboard with a lot of components around the outside of the motherboard especially, it's going to make life a lot easier for your cable routing, as well as your wiring of the motherboard itself. Today we're going to be using an ITX, so we're really not going to have any space concerns, but we'll mount it on the motherboard tray and then install the motherboard tray anyway. In mounting the motherboard to the tray, orientation obviously is going to play a key factor. Make sure, top of the case, bottom of the case, PCI slots, expansion slots all face the top of the case. Standoffs are already built into the motherboard tray for ITX, as well as micro ATX, with only 1 missing, which if you're using a micro ATX, you will have to put in standard standoff into place. So we are going to drop the motherboard right into place. In this case, obviously, an ITX, and put in the 4 screws to hold it into place. One thing I do want to point out on the motherboard mount, as you can see, this Asus ITX board uses a daughter card for the VRM. As a result, it needs a longer screw down the bottom. Silverstone is not shy with their screws for holding down the motherboard. They're not a tiny little screw like we're used to seeing, very delicate with a very fine spline. They use a much longer, larger screw. Absolutely no problem mounting this motherboard to this motherboard tray. I am using the TJ08-E to build a small form factor PCU, but I am not building a small performance PCU. So one of the nice things about it being the TJ08-E has 165 millimeters of clearance for the CPU cooler, so I'm not going to skimp there. I'm going to be using a Cooler Master TPC 812, which stands 163 millimeters tall. I've got 165 millimeters of clearance in the TJ08-E. Obviously, with the motherboard mounted, this huge hole in the motherboard tray is going to make it very, very easy to mount my CPU cooler. No problem at all getting to the back plate. So with the cooler now in place, we've got a 1-piece install into the case. Literally just going to be a matter of putting the motherboard tray into place and 3 screws back in, and our entire motherboard assembly is in place. Moving back to the case itself, we're going to start mounting some hard drives. First we have the top hard disk cage, which as you can see will hold 4 3.5s and is removable. Two screws, and it just pops right out. Obviously, drive mounting, very, very simple. Slides into place, standard 4 screws, 2 on each side in order to mount the drives. However, that is not necessarily what you want to use. If you're only using one drive, or if you're using 2 2.5s or a 2.5 and a 3.5, you're going to want to use the bottom piece down here, leave the top hard drive cage out. Reason being, you've got this big 181 up here, 180mm fan. You want to give it clear shot right to the CPU cooler. Drive mounting in the bottom tray is actually pretty interesting. Very different again. A 2.5-inch SSD will actually go into place and will actually screw in through the bottom, holding it into place. A 3.5, or in this case a 2.5 with a 3.5-inch adapter, will go into place and screw in with standard 4 screws. Obviously on the bottom you've got standoffs and 4 screws as well to hold the SSD in place. Taking a look at the bottom of the case, you see the 4 mounting screws and standoffs to hold in the SSD. It's now time to get the motherboard tray back into place with the completed motherboard on it, and we'll just bring it around back and it will drop into its slot. Make sure you align all the clips, pull back, tray is into place. Use the rear screw to secure it and pull it into place. You can then put the final 2 holding screws into place. And your motherboard tray is back in with the completed motherboard. As you can see, coming around the front, we've got plenty of room, good working environment, and we can begin our cable routing and final installation. Interesting and important to point out, you do notice that with the SSD mounted to the bottom of the case, you do have complete access to the back of the SSD through the other side of the case. With all the work done around the area, I'm going to lift the CPU support into place. It will flex up, come up against the CPU cooler. You want to hold it snug against the CPU cooler and tighten it on the bottom side of the case. This will act as a support for the CPU cooler, taking the stress away from the motherboard. Now I've got the system in and wired up, and as you can see, we've got some good cable routing, very little. The one anomaly being the fan cable. The fan is mounted with the cabling coming off the front side, as you can see in the corner, the opposite corner you'd normally expect it to be. That combined with the only fan header on this board being all the way on the other side of the CPU cooler, it does wind up being a little bit short. Nothing a fan extension cable can't solve, or the fact of the matter is most boards are going to have a CPU or a chassis fan header right in this area. So it's really not going to be short. This is a cause of the motherboard, not a cause of the case itself. Very well put together, very nice looking. If I were going to be using the iGPU, the Intel 4000 graphics, we'd basically be done. But of course we want to build a performance system in a small form factor, so we're going to take it a step further. As we've seen, the TJ08-E is not a tool-free case, and the expansion slots are no exception. First thing you'd have to do, 2 screws, is remove the rear cover for the expansion slots. Each expansion slot then has its own screw, which needs to be removed before the slot can be opened. Obviously, it goes back together exactly the same way. Cover into place, screw in. Typically in a smaller form factor case, this is the part where we'd be telling you what GPUs won't fit in the case. That's not going to be the case here. Small form factor, but still capable of very powerful components. So we're going to use an Asus GTX 680 3-slot direct CU, which is actually the largest single GPU cooler I have come across. And pop it right into place. Obviously it needs to be screwed in for support. With the screws and the expansion slots in place, the GTX 680 in there nice and solid. This particular GPU does have a backplate, so you're not going to really get any sag. If you're using a GPU without a backplate, the front or the top hard disk drive cage also becomes a GPU support. It even comes with an optional rubber pad that can be placed up here and will support the GPU, so it's not going anywhere. So really, Silverstone thought of everything as far as using a large GPU in the TJ08-E. Taking a look at the back of the motherboard tray, good cable routing options throughout. You've got plenty of space between the motherboard tray and the side of the case to get all your cables just the way you want them. Great little addition, this little notch out up top for any extra cables that are coming off your power supply that you're not going to be using. In this case, PCI Express cable, just tucked right up in the corner, out of the way. Nice cable routing options behind the motherboard tray. In the end, we were able to fit some very large components in a very small area with the TJ08-E. Obviously, just a built-for-speed system. Micro ATX or mini ITX motherboard. The motherboard went in without a problem. Removable motherboard tray. Full-size CPU cooler, sitting 163 millimeters, fits without a problem. 3-slot, longest single GPU cooler on the market right now in a GTX 680. Once again, being supported by the second hard disk drive cage, which easily comes out if you're using a backplated large GPU, which is going to open this up. 180 millimeter air penetrator fan blowing directly into the CPU cooler is going to do some great cooling, keep the entire case cool. Single fan and positive pressure. SSD 3.5 mounted right in the bottom without a problem. The second hard disk drive cage capable of another 4 hard disks. Not the easiest installation in the world. It is a little bit time consuming, but everything goes together very cleanly. It's precisely put together. It's very well put together. It's also a very solid case. Silverstone did a very, very nice job with the TJ08-E. Very well engineered, well executed, and just a really pretty case throughout.